All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation, How Not to Run a Marathon. For those of you who are here to how to run a marathon, that's the one next door. Easy to get confused, but tonight we're going to be talking about how not to run a marathon with Jeff Campbell. It's a privilege to have Jeff here. I've known him as he moved to Hong Kong. When we decide who we want to get to talk about how to get better at marathons. We could have actually talked to someone who, has gone through, college track and, has done all the work and all of that. But Jeff was not like that. When he first got to Hong Kong, he was genuinely slow and he was genuinely fat. And so to get him along tonight, I think is great because, it's not, we didn't take, a Jeff that was kind of 90% there and he, ran a great marathon. He was somewhere down here and he worked hard. He had a plan, and over a number of years, he got to the 2:29:12 that he did in Berlin earlier this year. I had a look today, and that places him, I think, at number 4 in the rankings in Hong Kong, which is not bad for a guy who only just broke 4 hours 3 years ago. So, yeah, we think he's going to have a lot of stories, a lot of tips for tonight, just in terms of how he got there, and hopefully you can take that with you tonight as you go and do Hong Kong Marathon in a few weeks' time, or Tokyo, or whatever your marathon is going to be. With that, I shall pass across to Jeff.
Thank you, John. For anyone who's running the Standard Chartered Marathon, if you pay attention today, regardless of whether you trained, you'll break 3 hours for sure. What I want to cover here is all of the lessons that I have learned in my road running career. So a little bit about me. I'm mostly a trail runner. Started running in Hong Kong about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, but have dabbled on the road a little bit. And it's been a really interesting journey. I've learned a lot. And this is really, next slide, the story of my 3 very different marathons. So go to the next slide. Yeah. So as John said, it was actually 5 years ago was my first ever attempt. I had moved to Hong Kong about 6 months before that, and that's when I started running. So I had no prior running background. During that 6-month time period, I had done a couple of 5Ks, I did a half marathon, and I thought, hey, why not sign up for a marathon? So about 5 weeks before the China coast, I decided to register online and thought, hey, this will be fun. What could go wrong? So my goal time for the race was, I didn't really have a goal time. I didn't know how fast I should be running. In fact, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was running the race, and on race morning I said, so what's a good marathon time? And he says, just run easy, just run comfortable. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go out and I'll run how I feel. So next slide. Kind of gives you an idea of where I was in my physiological development. It was probably a little bit in between these 2 guys, actually. So this was the spring of 2015. A little bit bigger, didn't really have a runner's body, just sort of a regular guy. Next slide. Wasn't like a really, really formal training plan. I was kind of doing about 30K a week. Did a big long run. Maybe an hour and 20 minutes. Didn't do any tune-up races. So it was basically just let's see what happens. So what happened? Broke 4 hours. I was pretty happy about that. Did not break it comfortably. That's probably one of the worst splits you'll ever see in any marathon. Almost a positive split by an hour. Ran a really nice first half and just an absolutely tragic second half. But managed to pick it up right at the end and crack the 4-hour barrier. This race taught me a lot. It taught me to respect the distance, that 42K is a long way to go, and that a marathon deserves a lot of respect. It requires preparation. I didn't know that. I learned the lesson the hard way. So I decided to take a little bit of time off from the road. I really enjoyed trail running, so I went back to do some more trail running. Next slide. I then signed up for a marathon about 18 months later. By this point, I had run a lot in that interim period. So I started to take my trail running seriously, started to have some success on the trails, and thought, listen, why not see if I can do something about that marathon time. I knew that I was going to be in better shape and that I would be able to improve on my PB. I had no idea how much. And I didn't really have I didn't have a coach at the time, so really just trying to take a guess at where I might be given my fitness and my performance on the trails. I set a relatively arbitrary goal time of 2 hours 50, which is a pretty big chunk off of my original marathon time. So that requires maintaining a pace of just over 4 minutes a kilometer for 42 kilometers. Okay. So this is the guy who was running that race as opposed to this guy. That helps. It's a long race, so I had lost some weight. This was taken about 2 weeks before the race at the Lantau vertical. So next slide. The build-up was different than the first one. This was the first time that I had put in really heavy volume. It was the first time that I had cracked 400 kilometers for a month. It's about 100K a week. Got over 5 just before the taper. I was also racing a lot more, and in the month before the marathon, it was my best ever streak of performances on the trail. Won 3 races at a range of distances, and was aerobically in really, really good shape. Yes. So the marathon was, I believe, like the second week of October, something like that. This was beginning of September. This was the following week, and this was the following week. So yeah, and then I had 2 weeks, I think, no racing in between the vertical. I mean, this is a short race. I think this one was 18K, but I was having speed on the trails. My body was feeling aerobically very fit. Had a nice block of training during the summer in the Hong Kong heat. Was feeling in really, really good shape. So how did it go? Not bad. Didn't make my my goal time. Still broke 3 hours. Obviously, still a PB. This is not the face of a guy who really, really was having fun in the last 10 kilometers. The split was ugly. It's another ugly split. More than 10 minutes positive. I had really, really bad cramping in the last 10K. You know, some people say the marathon is 2 halves. The first 32 and then the last 10. Yeah, it was, again, it wasn't a complete disaster, but it didn't go how I wanted it to go. Again, it taught me that although I did respect the marathon a lot more this time, there were still a lot of mistakes that I made during my training. This was also in 2016. So after this, next slide. I wouldn't sign up for another marathon for another 3 years, because I knew that if I wanted to do it again, it was going to require dedication. It would require focus for a period of time, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to be ready for that. So at the beginning of last year, I decided that this was going to be my sort of big racing goal for 2019, was to take a real crack at the marathon again. Signed up for Berlin, and my original goal time wasn't sub 2:30. By this point, I had a coach. I'm coached by Andy Dubois, and we negotiated over a goal time. For a marathon, you really have to kind of start with your goal time and then work backwards because you have to maintain a consistent pace. So I had proposed sub 240. He said, no, that's too slow. You can do 235. Fine. So started the training block with 235 in mind. But as we got closer to the race, we set sub 230 as the goal. That requires keeping a race pace of 3 minutes 33 seconds per kilometer for 42 kilometers and 195 meters after that. It's pretty quick. If any of us were to go out and do that for 1 kilometer, including me, it would you'd be panting. Some people might have trouble doing that at all. So it requires just a lot different of a build-up than I had before. Okay, so this is sort of the training block from a high level. We'll dive into this a lot deeper. Started off of a relatively low base. I had been doing some trail running early in the year and was in okay shape, but nothing special. And by the end of April, my trail races were done for that part of the season, and I was probably running about 80 or 90 kilometers a week, which is sort of normal maintenance for me. So starting in May, completely got off the trails, and then had a relatively conservative build-up to a big block. And that's in the middle of the heat and humidity in the Hong Kong summer. So this is tough miles. But all of this is road specific. So I'll go through each month in a little bit of detail. Also did some racing during the summer, almost all road. And really trying to work on my speeds. This is one of the AVOC 5K races. I managed to lower my 5K PR a few times. What do you mean?
You did Tiger's Head as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so that was sort of another one. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, so I just wanted to go through the build-up, sort of month by month. This goes sort of chronologically down to up. So as you can see, started off. This is not particularly heavy. It's 7 hours a week, basically 6.5 hours a week of running. This is simple stuff, all flat, 400, 300 meters a week, mostly singles, rest days all over the place. But all of this was on the road, and you'll see each of these yellow dots, that's a workout. So that's a speed session on the track. So early on, mileage was relatively low, but building in speed and sharp speed. So these are often 400, 800 meter repeats at the track, getting the body used to running fast, trying to improve that running economy early on in the training cycle. What's going to happen as we go through sort of month by month, the workouts tend to get longer and closer to race pace. So these early sessions, a bit counterintuitively, they're actually sort of the fastest running that I did in the cycle, but for short bursts, really trying again to get that running economy, the turnover of the legs, running fast on flat ground, getting that sort of locked into the body, and then building the mileage on top. So, and the long runs, very easy, flat. A 23K long run on flat roads, it's an hour and 45 minutes, and 2 hours. This is not a huge time commitment yet, but the speed is important.
Jeff, what's just on the Wednesday there? You've got like 3 circles. What does that mean?
So yeah, when there's multiple circles, so like this is a double. So that means on that Monday, I ran 25K in total. That would probably be about 10 in the morning, 15 at night. Not too many doubles at this point in the cycle. There's going to be lots of doubles coming up. So that would be a triple. On a Wednesday night, I tend to do strength training at Joint Dynamics. So that's probably going to be, I'm guessing, a morning track workout, and then a run before Joint Dynamics, and then Joint Dynamics, and a quick run home. That's the tiny little one. Okay. All right, next slide. So this is June, so we're about 4 months out here, and the mileage is sort of ticking up to maybe about 120K a week average. Starting to see a lot more doubles. So again, breaking up the mileage in morning and night. Still not crazy amount of hours, between 8.5 and 11 hours a week of running, and still sort of lots of rest days. This is two. Yeah, that's a couple. That's a couple of rest days. Long runs, still easy. Nothing fancy about them. The workouts still mostly fast. They haven't really gotten into the long, sort of really killer workouts yet.
Would you recommend to always run on flat, or we can vary a bit?
Okay, so good question. So in the build up to my Toronto marathon, the 253, all of my long runs, as well as most of all of my running, was out on the trails and the mountains, rolling, really the lovely stuff that you get in Hong Kong. This is all road. This is all pavement. So it's about really just locking in the turnover, the cadence that you need on the road, and it's not. I don't like that as a long run, but all of these, even the easy ones, are flat. So I live in Tin Hau. I would usually go out to like Kennedy Town and back, or just run on Bowen Road for 2 hours.
I live on the other side, so I train from Chinwan to Chinwan.
Yeah.
That's why it's hilly.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah. I think hilly can be okay if it's still on the roads. And I think at this point in the training cycle, it matters a little bit less. As you get to like where we'll go in August, the long runs become sort of combination long run workouts. Those need to be done on flat. Okay, so next slide. Mileage is getting up there, so we're sort of at a 140, 145. Takes a little bit more time. For me, I just need to be doubling to get that much mileage in. The workouts are getting longer, so the reps, instead of doing like 12 by 400 or 8 by 800, they're going to be sort of longer, maybe mile repeats, and again, the pace will start to get a little bit closer to the heat adjusted goal marathon pace, because you have to remember that for the workouts, when you're doing them in July and August in Hong Kong, you're not going to be able to run at your marathon pace when it's a cool weather marathon. So you have to sort of discount by about 15 to 20 seconds per kilometer if you're in 30 plus heat. You can see 2 rest days. I think that was a business trip. Nothing else. So it's basically a 7-day-a-week calendar. Long runs are getting longer. So these are sort of going from 23 to 25. sort of up to 30. Still nothing special about these long runs. They're still just sort of easy. The workouts are starting to get really, really tough, and the heat's not helping. But like 145K, 140K, there's like no elevation in here. This is all flat running. So again, this is all purpose, one goal race in mind.
Jeff,
yeah.
got a pretty serious job as well. So a lot of this, I guess, is before work and after work, just wherever you can find the time.
And a lot of this is like running in Bangladesh or India or Singapore. So a lot of this is on the road as well. So like not on the road, but on. But you find the time. You wake up early. You do a quick run after work. And again, the time commitment, like for people training for an ultra, they probably train 10, 11 hours a week. It's not crazy. The mileage looks higher because it's on the road. You can actually get more of it in. So a 3-hour run on the trails, if you're going over the Twins and everything, you're not gonna get as far as if you're just going on pure flat ground. Okay, this is a tough month. So yeah, So it's a interesting point. I mean, here's a rest day. This is a rest day. That's a rest day. That Friday's a rest day. A rest day doesn't have to mean a day off. No, it doesn't. You can recover by having an easy run. You need the volume. You just need the volume to really crack a marathon.
It can be 45 minutes, 1 hour, and that's it.
It can be half an hour. Yeah. But it's still going to give your body some stimulus. That's still going to be another little drop in the bucket. You need the volume. So no days off, but there's some rest in there. You have to kind of look hard. But if you kind of look at the weeks, the track sessions are getting just brutal, like a 25K track session. That's tough. This is the point where the long runs start to get a little bit more complicated. So I'll go into some of the sort of specific marathon workouts, but starting, I think with that one, the long run started to feature really fast finishes to sort of simulate the sensation of trying to keep marathon pace on tired legs. And again, you combine it with the Hong Kong heat, really putting the body through a fair bit. You also just notice that you don't get a ton of rest or recovery between workouts. So 30K on Monday and then a run in the morning and then a workout and then double the next day and then a light day and then a big workout and then a sort of rest day and then a long run. My legs are feeling tired most days here. It's part of the process, right? This is still not a ton of hours, 11 and a half hours, but it's a lot of stress on the body. Sure, yeah. Yeah, get lots of sleep. Try to be sensitive to how your body's feeling. If you're having a niggle, maybe push a workout by a day and do an easy run instead. Go to the physio if you need. But I wasn't really having too many niggles during this cycle. Again, I took a 5-month build-up to this marathon, so it's not like I said, okay, I'm going to go from the couch to run 150K a week. By doing it incrementally, by building up in phases, you give your body the chance to adapt to each part of the training cycle. So it doesn't say that injuries can't happen, but I didn't really have anything beyond just general fatigue. Yeah. The red dots are races. So started to do a little bit of racing. The small dots are just 2 of the 5K races. The 17K one is a trail race that I kind of forgot that I had signed up for, but that was like the only trail running I did for the entire cycle. Had a good race. Yeah, so anyway, this month is sort of where the real work for the marathon happened. And it was sort of towards the end of this month that I had asked my coach, is 2:30 realistic? And he said 2:30 is like you're really playing with fire at that type of pace, because if your body can't sustain it, it's going to be just an absolute breakdown on the road and a disaster. But why don't you go for it? So at that point, basically, sort of locked in the goal, and by the end of August, I was really asking, can we start the taper now? I really want to taper. And next slide. Yeah, taper sort of started about pretty late, actually, about 2 weeks out. So 3 weeks out, still running 150K. How many rest days in that month?
Could be a few.
One, I think. I mean, 1 day off. So tapering for a marathon, you do need to cut your mileage. That sort of helps lock in the training. But you don't need to stop your running, and in fact, you shouldn't. It's not necessarily for losing fitness. It's you want to stay sharp, and your body can actually handle more than most people think. So anyway, the track sessions are still long. These are really hard long runs because of the pace. At the end of them, I'll go into a little bit more detail about sort of what they look like. Still some doubling sort of until 2 weeks out, then I've mostly cut out the doubling. You'll notice 2 races in the 2 weeks before, so those were 5K races. So I was racing 5Ks 8 days out from the marathon. That's okay. Your body doesn't need that long to recover from a 5K race. Can be really good to do a few things. One, you just get the experience of, okay, putting on a bib, waking up on a race morning, getting my gear out. It's good to sort of practice that a few times before your big marathon effort. And also, it's just like another type of workout. And you wouldn't want to do like a super long race. I wouldn't do a half marathon a week out. But your body can recover quite quickly from a 5K. And even on race week, still one workout and no days completely off. Just trying to get into the cycle every day, getting the body in motion. By this point, it's really used to running every day, so giving it a little bit of that while not tiring yourself out. I think I arrived in 3 days before, on the Thursday. Yeah, so I did like a 7K shakeout, a 5K shakeout, and then like a 15-minute, just a little guy, which they didn't feel super easy. Like it's interesting. You wake up on race morning and the energy is just there, but don't be surprised if just a couple of days out you find race pace to be still hard to maintain. But yeah, you can see it just in terms of the cut down, pretty standard. So maybe about 25% off or a third, and then another sort of 25-30% off, and then race week just what is it, maybe 25K plus the marathon. Yeah, so yeah.
What about the nutrition in August especially? Did you change diet?
Yeah, so nutrition, I'm not too fussy about nutrition. I just try to watch my weight, eat reasonably healthy. I'm not a vegan. I enjoy a beer. I cut out the alcohol probably about mid-August, about 6 weeks before the race, just to get sort of as lean as I can and try to clean everything up. And then, standard sort of carb loading, cut out meat about 2 or 3 days before the race, and just pure carbs the day before. It's in terms of race day nutrition, you're only out there for a couple hours. It's not as massive of a deal. So. Yeah. Okay, so the workouts. So I'll just sort of dive into a little bit of what I was doing in those orange dots and the dark green long runs. These guys are some of Hong Kong's top marathoners. So I would ask for help for the long runs because it's really tough at the end of sort of 30K runs to be keeping the type of pace that I needed to. And when you have people sort of keeping you honest, you can go a little bit quicker. So yeah, that was a fun day out. John joined me for parts of some of these. Yeah. Yeah. So next slide. Yeah. So one workout I'd recommend. Anyone here heard of Yasso's? Yeah. It's a fun little workout. So just speed, 10 times 800 meters, and so that's 2 laps around a standard athletic track, plus a 1 lap jog recovery. That can be slow. That should actually be about the same time as what your 2 laps at full speed are. You sustain that over 10 reps. And that should give you, according to Bart Yasso, a predictor of your marathon time. So if your 800-meter takes 3 minutes flat, then your marathon time should be 3 hours. I think it's a little bit aggressive of a predictor. I think most people are a little bit slower than what their Yassos will predict. It's a really nice workout to do early on in a cycle to give you a sense of where you might be in terms of your conditioning, your marathon time, and then you can do it a little bit closer, just sort of as a fun one to see if it's improved. So again, that's just an easy speed workout. Okay, next. Yeah, so this is sort of a variation on does everyone know what a tempo run is? Yeah, so yeah. So it's basically like a sustained run of between 40 and 60 minutes, sort of the fastest pace that you can sustain over that period of time. I typically don't do tempo runs. My standard sort of workouts are just sort of track intervals or hill repeats, and then my weekly long run. This is sort of an interesting variation in that it's a fairly high consistent, or well, I guess inconsistent effort that plays with your lactate threshold. So it's a long workout. So the the Yasso's 8K of fast running. This has 50 minutes, almost an hour of the actual fast portion, which is going to be faster than your marathon pace. So these are really, really hard 5-minute bursts. So, well, heat adjusted, I was probably doing what my actual Berlin pace was. So I was probably doing about 330s, but in like 30-degree, 80% humidity for 5 minutes. And then the rest portions, that you don't actually get to rest, right? So the rest portions were probably at around 4 minutes a K, or three. I think between 350 and 4 minutes a K. That's the rest portion, and you only get 60 seconds of that, and then it's time to run really, really fast again. This is tough. This is really, really, really tough. But it forces you to go at a pace that you cannot sustain, and then just get enough recovery sustain the workout, and then you're back at it. So this is really mental toughness, but also really, really good for the legs to get that large of a speed workout all in one chunk. You're gonna want to do this towards the end of your training block. You probably won't be ready for it early on. You need to build up to it. Whereas something like the ASOs, you can do that whenever you want. And remember, this is going to be everyone's going to have a different target marathon pace. So it should be hard for you, regardless of whether you're trying to run a 3.5-hour marathon or a 2.5-hour marathon. So it's meant to be tough for everyone. This is not just for super fast guys or girls. Okay, next. And then this is the long run fast finish. Really something that I'd recommend everyone do. The marathon, like I said, it's a race of two halves, the last 10K being the second half. That's when, in all of my previous races, I started to cramp. I started to lose my speed. So what this does, you go out for easy, which is not super easy. You're still going to want to go reasonably fast. So I think for these, I was probably doing about 4 minutes a K for the easy portion. And then I dropped down to marathon pace for 10K, which is tough. And then going a little bit below that for the last 5K. And you might want to do a 2 kilometer sort of recovery at the end, just sort of jog it out. Some variations on this. So some of my other long run fast finishes would have about 15 to 18K easy, and then maybe some 3 or 4 kilometers and with a 1K sort of like a cruise interval. Go back to 4 minutes a K and then back down to 325s, 330. So again, just playing with that sort of just enough rest and then below your marathon pace. I did these. I think I did 4 long runs with fast finishes in the sort of last 6 weeks before the race.
I mean, all of these look like pretty tough sessions.
Mm.
In general, would you say that the tougher the session, the more it sucked, the more benefit that you got from it?
Well, it's load, right? So your body responds to training load. You apply load, you apply stimulus, your body gets stress, it recovers, super compensates, gets stronger. So if you want to really improve your fitness, your performance, you need to progressively apply larger and larger training loads. So yes, these all sort of have different amounts of training load. The ASOs would not sort of be a huge one. The easy long runs would be sort of, those are just about sort of building up to where you can sustain these. And that's why these happen towards the end of the block. Yeah. But by that point, your body's able to take that without breaking down. Okay, next. Yeah, so race day, after all of that. Marathon racing is pretty simple from an equipment point of view: 4 gels, pair of shoes, lucky headband, and that's it. This was the biggest race in terms of number of participants I'd ever done. So you have to find your bathroom with 50,000 other people there, and then we were all off. There were a lot of runners in this race, and it was interesting from a pacing perspective. You can find a pack to run in, sort of regardless of what your pace is. But I did have a little bit of trouble locking in exactly my goal pace while running with other runners. So I found early on a pack of people who were going for about 2:30, but they started to fall off the pace a little bit. I crossed the halfway mark at, I think, 1:15:30 something, which was behind the target pace, and I started to really get nervous there because it meant I was going to have to do a negative split to get under. And eventually I just sort of left that pack alone and said, well, I need to go for it. So next slide. Yeah, so I went under my goal time. I basically knew exactly what I had to run. You know, it was 17:45 5K splits times 8, and then again for another 2.2. And one thing I noticed during this race is it never felt easy the first half. You know, even the first 10K. I felt like I was really working, wasn't sure if I'd be able to sustain it. Progressively as the race went on, could feel the legs, you know, the lactic acid building, but I didn't feel like I needed to slow down. So in previous races, in the marathons, I had bad cramping towards the end of the race. The legs just were able to keep going, and that's you know, it wasn't you know, by virtue of magic or because I had the fancy shoes. It was because enough load was applied during the training process and enough specificity to run fast towards the end of long runs and all of the speed work. They conditioned my body to be able to run at the pace that I aim to do.
And then the splits.
Yeah, and the split. So yeah, it's the first time that I'd ever run a negative split in a marathon by far. The previous splits were, you know, 50 minutes and 10 minutes. So yeah, but again, it just shows that the process leads to the result. You know, it's not. We can go back to the fat slide. I wasn't born a runner. You know, we're all capable of improving our performance if you go through it methodically, if you apply principles that are just known. None of this is sort of groundbreaking. It's just about doing it properly, seeing it all the way through. So next slide. Yeah, so just a few really, really simple takeaways. You need to run a lot. You just do. If you want to, you know, really run at your sort of maximum performance, this is what the full-time professionals do. This is what the really talented amateurs do. You know, it's not that they don't have anything else to do. Just running is something that your body needs a lot of volume to really get those aerobic benefits. I ran a lot for the second marathon, but I didn't run specifically. I didn't train specifically for the road. So specificity matters. If you want to run a really good marathon time, you're gonna have to dedicate a training block to the marathon. If you love being out on the trails, you're gonna have to give that up for a little bit in order to really maximize your performance. Again, it's all about sacrifice. This is really, really necessary. And then there's no miracles that happen on the morning of a race. Like, only bad things can happen. Either it can go to plan or it can go terribly. No one ever, you know, oh, I didn't train, but for some reason I ran my best time ever. No, like it's you do everything that you can. You control every knob that you can control to minimize the chance that everything will get screwed up, and that's all you can do, and then you just hope that it goes. But yeah, just you put in the work before the race day, and then hope that that everything goes fine. So I think that's it.
How did you feel about the micro trade after?
Yeah. So. I was really I missed them a lot, and I really noticed just how beautiful they were, and it was great to be back on them. In terms of my performance on the trails, it actually took probably about 2 months to fully get the trail legs back. So I was running really, really big mileage with no elevation, no technical running. So that did take a little while for the muscle memory to come back, for the sort of the trail steel to get back into the legs. I thought it would come back a little bit quicker, but it's not so much the race itself that puts a lot of stress on the body. It's that training block before and the lack of trail specificity. So that second rule for running for a marathon, that applies to trails as well. You can't only run on roads and then expect to be fantastic, on Lantau or the Twins. So it took a little while to get back. Yeah. So again, we have lots of time for questions, so fire away.
Build up to your marathon. Did you get injured or not?
No. And in fact, not really even any niggles. For the most part, it was just some days where I felt a little bit tired, maybe not fully recovered enough to do a track session, and if that's the case, I would just postpone that a day, still do a run, but do an easy run, and then do the track day the next day. Really lucky with injuries in that block.
A lot of your sessions are pace-based.
Mm.
Check heart rate to some degree, or power output, or other metrics, or
Yeah, I don't use a power meter because I always lose them. I have lots of pairs of shoes. Heart rate, I monitor my heart rate. I have a optical wrist heart rate monitor, but it's just another sort of data point. I don't use it for training zones or anything. So all of my workouts were pace based. Yeah, so if you go back to the gear slide, maybe. My race nutrition was actually not much different from any of my my trail running races. Your body can take at full aerobic work about 200 to 300 calories per hour. And you already have enough glycogen in your muscles to last for about an hour and a half. So I just take a 100-calorie gel every 30 minutes. So what I did, I had 4 gels and 30, 60, hour and a half, 2 hours, I had a gel. Just kept them in my pocket. So that's race nutrition. Cup of water, maybe the halfway point. I don't know. You don't need a lot of nutrition for the marathon. You should take in some carbohydrates during the race because otherwise you may bonk in the second half, but you don't need much. You don't need to be eating a lot of real foods or anything. Just any of these gels will do the trick.
How long does it take for you to recover from the marathon?
Afterwards, I didn't run much the following week, and to get fully recovered, it was probably about 6 weeks to 2 months. Yeah. There's a reason why the real elite guys and girls maybe do 2 or 3 marathons a year. Again, it's not, you're not recovering from the race, you're recovering from the training block that precedes it.
Did you take recovery after your race?
Yes, Jojo, I took recovery.
But I read a lot, it is 1 day per mile. So you actually need far more rest than the other elites that I encountered.
For me, I think the recovery, maybe I'm defining it differently. That was sort of when I felt fast again on the trail. So maybe it wasn't just fully recovery, but also sort of building back in the strength that I needed to run on trails. But recovery is a good point. It's really good to have a recovery drink immediately after, not just the race, but hard workouts. Get some protein in the body. That helps rebuild the muscles that you're damaging during every workout. But recovery just also needs time, and it needs sleep. The sleep is really, really important.
You talked about you did a lot of the hard running at the end of your long runs,
Mm.
and your yellow dogs, you call them track running.
Mm.
It was 25k. Was that all done on a track? Were you doing some of them sessions on the roads?
Mostly on track. A lot of it on Happy Valley, actually. Yeah, so just yeah, yeah, around the oval. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's like tough sessions on the body and on the mind, but it's sort of that's the point. Hey, hey, hey. Not a lot. So I'm lucky. One of my sponsors is Joint Dynamics. We do they offer for the team a weekly strength session. Often when I'm doing the doubling, I have a work, a family. It's tough to do everything. Strength is a good thing to do if you can fit it into the schedule, but I wouldn't do it at the expense of your actual running. If you have time for everything else and strength, do that. If it's between an hour of strength or getting an extra hour of sleep, the sleep is really important too. So you only have so many hours in the day, and for me, the volume is more important than the strength training. The running is you are strengthening your body when you're doing the running. So you don't think that if you're running 130, 140 kilometers a week, you're not doing core exercise. That is core exercise. That's hardening all the bits that you need to harden for your race.
In that same respect, did you do any mental training? For like these workouts that just sort of absolutely suck, and then avoiding hitting the wall, etc. Did you do any mental coaching to like you knew your legs to get through it, but like in your mind?
Nothing formal. So as I said, for the long runs, those would often sort of be where I'd want to just say, I can't do another rep of this. For those, having company to keep me honest was sort of the mental trick that I would do. So, I would have, either the local marathon guys. I had Matt Clark join me, who's like a 2:32 marathoner for some of the end of my long runs. Having someone there to kind of push you, make sure that you're not quitting, make sure you're not, stopping your watch and taking a sneaky sort of extra minute of rest. That was sort of what I did. And nothing in terms of like meditation or mental coaching. I knew what I needed to do. I knew that it wasn't always going to be fun, and I needed to get through it. So that's just sort of how I did it mentally. Yeah.
You mentioned stopping giving up meat in a week of a marathon. What's the rationale behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't want to give any sort of fake expertise, but from what I've read, the body can take a little bit more time to get meat through the digestive tract. You also just don't need that much protein as fuel. Protein is more of the recovery sort of nutrient. So typically in a race week, I might actually protein load a little bit early on in the race week and then progressively get carb heavy until maybe about a day and a half out, almost all carbs. And the day before, I didn't mention this, not too many sort of veggies or salads or anything. You don't want too much kind of easy to go through. There's nothing sort of super scientific about it, but that's the basic idea.
What's next?
I have nine dragons in 10 days. Nothing planned for the road for me right now. I mean, one thing that this taught me is it requires a huge block to run at a high level for the marathon. The thought of giving up another 5 months to maybe shave 1 or 2 minutes off of a PB is mentally I'm not there right now. Maybe in a year or two I'll say, yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
You talk about you did gels every 30 minutes in the race. Did you do that when you were doing your long runs and these 30Ks with a fast finish, or did you try to run them without a gel?
Yeah, so the long ones with a fast finish, I would simulate race nutrition. For the easy, 23, 25K, 2-hour runs, yeah, do them. Yeah, maybe put a gel in the back pocket, but you don't really. It's not a workout. Your body can make it through that. But yeah, for the long runs fast finish, you're trying to simulate those sort of last 10K of the race as much as you can. Really good to practice your nutrition as well. So for those Bowen runs, we had water stations set up, so you grab and do your hydration and your nutrition on the run. Yeah.
Your take on the Vaporfly? Huh?
I like them. Yeah, that's a nice shoe. A lot of the elite road runners are using the shoes. Do you have one of the carbons here? Yeah. Yeah. The Carbon X. Yeah. Or what about also the skinny one, right? Yeah. So a lot of the sort of high-end road running shoes now will have a carbon plate in them. They're really, 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 really stiff. The energy return is really good. So the Nike Vaporfly is the same thing. The Hoka Carbon X is a really, really nice shoe, and it just gives you better energy return, and just sort of anything that you can to help. It's not going to replace training. If anyone wants to try, it's kind of funny to, if you haven't sort of felt a carbon shoe before. I mean, and also on those long runs, putting on your marathon shoe for that, and replicating everything that I was even wearing sort of my race day kit on those runs just to make sure if there's going to be any chafing, any hot spots, you don't want to find out on race day. Not really. I mean, again, when during that build up, anything that potentially could blistered way before the race and sort of healed and got So again, the whole point of all of this is by race day, you're not applying any new stimulus to the body except kind of putting everything, all the different components together at once. You have done every single aspect of what the race is going to be throughout the whole cycle. If you do it like this, you're just never going to get a new blister on race day. Most of them. Yeah. They're not all pretty. Yeah. Okay, good question. So I rotate shoes, including models and brands. I think it's really important to avoid repetitive stress injuries, to vary the level of drop that you have in your shoe, to deal with things like blisters, having different toe box shapes and everything. Running is a repetitive motion, and when you're doing 150K a week, it's a lot of steps. If you're just varying the foot strike patterns based on the shoes, that's one way to help. And I would go through a lot of different shoes sort of during the build up. I had a couple of different sort of Vaporflies that sort of I mixed in for races and for some of the long runs, fast finishes, and workouts towards the end. Sort of earlier on, it was just sort of in the training block, whatever I felt like wearing. Yeah, but it depends. So I mean, most shoes can handle about 400, 500 Ks quite easily. You've raised your eyebrows a little bit there.
You should be getting at least 800 Ks out of
Yeah. I go through, I don't know. My shoes can fray after a little bit. For my race shoes, I will probably retire them into like the training rotation because you can lose a little bit of energy return, especially with the carbon fiber plate as the mileage accumulates on them. But you measure your shoe durability by mileage, not by time or age. So if you have more shoes in the rotation, they will all last longer. And they'll also it's hot in the summer, you're sweating, allows them to dry out, for a day or two after your last run. There's no reason not to rotate through lots of pairs of shoes. I don't just say that because Gone Running is one of my sponsors. Good question. Probably about 50. Yeah. You said wow? You thought that was a lot or not a lot? Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, I would never sort of go totally brand new into a shoe on a race. I did on some of the 5Ks, but yeah, like for a big race. But it wasn't the first model of that shoe that I'd worn, so I knew that I knew that I agreed with the foot shape and everything, and it was just a matter of just kind of breaking in the shoelaces a little bit, I guess. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
You mentioned you sleep a lot. How much?
I said sleep is important. The more, the better. I maybe get 7.5 a night, 7 a night. During that cycle, basically the more mileage you're running, the more sleep you need. A lot of the recovery process happens when you're asleep. So I was probably trying to get to bed a little bit earlier, maybe trying to get 8.5 if I could. But again, like during those last 2 months, there were no days that I was out partying in Lang Kwai Fong. It was, you do your running in the morning, go to work, do a quick run, home for dinner, and to bed. It requires some discipline, but you need to get the volume in, and then you need to get the sleep in for the recovery. Probably should. Any other questions? If any, oh yeah.
What do you think of those Chinese runner running on road shoes for the 8100?
That's a different question. Yeah, I was surprised to see that. So for the most part, because the Vaporflies have a relatively high stack and a narrow lower, so in terms of stability, really easy to go over on your ankle with those. Now, I think it shows that in like dry Hong Kong conditions, you don't necessarily need big lugs for traction. Road shoes work on the trails. You don't necessarily need to switch every time you go from road to trail. Lots of shoes can do both just fine. But I think stability would be an issue. I can see in terms of a performance standpoint, the energy return on the super fast road shoes are really good, and they're very light. So for trail running, is just like any type of running, the lighter your shoes, that's going to be a more efficient ride, so long as you have as much stability as you personally need, and any protection. But to be honest, like the foam on any sort of high stacked road running shoe is probably going to be enough to absorb any of the rocks, as long as you don't go over on an ankle. Yeah. If anyone does have any questions, one, I'll stick around for a little bit afterwards, or just send me a Facebook message or whatever. I'm really easy to find. Love talking about running, for me, coming from just a really sort of everyday sort of off the couch runner, going through this journey over a number of years, I've learned so much from other people. So I'm always happy to share my experiences. So never be shy. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, if we can give a hand for Jeff. I hope that was really informative for everyone. And as Jeff said, he's going to be hanging around if you've got any other questions. For me personally, I learned that rest doesn't mean rest. Rest means a 10K run, or you get to run marathon pace for a couple of minutes. But just as a thanks for Jeff, this is just a few goodies for him to help him with his next marathon, which I hear is going to be a 2:19. No pressure. But look, once again, please give it up for Jeff and come and ask him some questions afterwards. Thank you.